how did it get up the hill without us hearing it? I'm just going to wait you out. It got to the point where I was like, leave us alone. So I'm Stacy Brown Jr. I'm from Crawfordville, Florida, and I got into Bigfoot as a child. My dad watched Sightings and Unsolved Mysteries and these other shows, and they would sometimes have segments about Bigfoot. So I was hooked, and then eventually they had a skunk ape episode, and I realized Bigfoot was in Florida, So I grew up in a very rural community. Like the county I live in is 85% woods right now. So even back in the late 80s, it was even more so. Like most of our roads were dirt, but we were way out, off the beaten trail. And we would look in the vacant, like wooded lots around our neighborhood for Bigfoot, so that was something I probably did for a few years, but it never was anything serious, more of something for the kids to do. We would get scared, and come running out of the woods. And fast forward to 2011, and Finding Bigfoot had an episode, their second episode ever, where a lady had a handprint on the inside of her door. And they put her name, on the screen. And so I looked up in the phone book and called her. And that was around June or July. And she told us to wait till November, once the snakes had kind of, died down a little bit, not as active. And so we did. But in this time, my dad had gotten bladder cancer, and they had to remove some of his bladder and then one of his kidneys, so he couldn't go with me. But he urged me to go. He knew I was looking forward to it, and we went. And immediately as we're coming down the driveway, we see this black figure step into the woods. And we're like, whoa, what was that? And so we stop, and alongside the driveway was this deep ravine. And the thing of whatever it was, it went down into that ravine, but we could still hear it, walking off in there. This area in Florida is not like the rest of the state. So most of the state is just flat, like sugar sand and pines and saw palmetto. This section of Florida is like mountains almost. I say that, but it's like elevation up to like 300 feet and then goes down. So it's about the closest thing we have to mountains. And so it went down in this ravine, and we couldn't see it, but we went on up to the house, met with the owners, and they gave us a grand tour. They were going down the trails and showing us where this guy saw one here, and this lady got growled at here, and here's some stick structures. And then they pulled us out to the far end of their property. They called it the Hermit Shack. And you're in the back corner where there's these planted pines, and you're going down this like little 1-lane dirt road to get back to it. And then it opens up, and there's like a 2-story shack. And if you can just imagine what Jason Voorhees might live in the woods, what that crazy psycho killer would live in the woods, that's exactly what it looked like. And she's like, okay, y'all can camp here. And we're kind of on the top of this hill because that ravine, it ended right down there. It met the creek that was at the base of the hill. And so, we kind of got the high ground there, and they dropped us off, and then they told us that we were the first people to ever camp on the property. Now, BFRO had been investigating this site for like 7 years prior to me showing up. So then we went walking the trail. We really didn't know the land, and we had walked probably 1.5 miles through the woods and sat on this one hill. And we were sitting there with the parabolic out and just listening. It was up by where they had these structures. So we're just listening, and it was November, so like the hickory nuts and other stuff was falling out of the trees. And all of a sudden, I started noticing that some of them were falling uphill. Like when they would bounce, they would come right uphill. And so that didn't seem right. So I got the thermal out. At the time, I had this little cheap thermal. They were so expensive back then, but it was for looking at like wires. If you were trying to tell where there was a hot or something like that on a wire. Excuse me. And we shined it across the ravine, panned it over that way, and there was this heat signature sitting behind a very small tree. And I just got the thing a few weeks before and really didn't know what I was looking at. Took a few pictures of it. And we kind of got freaked out. So we walked back to our camp. What we didn't realize is that the way the land was, if you went on the trail, it was like 1.5 miles. But if you just walked over like 2 hills, well, we were only, maybe a half mile away from our camp, which is important because we didn't hear the thing following us on our way back to camp, hear nothing like that. But when we got to camp, it was already there. Are you still there?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Thought I lost you. Okay, so it was still there, or it was already there. We're hearing stuff walk around the base of the hill, and it's November, so all the leaves have fallen and very crunchy. You can hear this thing walking, and so I get a flashlight and I shine the spot where I heard it from, and I don't see anything. And then I, go back doing what I'm doing, and I hear it again. And then I shine again. Nothing. Turn the light around, get back to doing what I'm doing. And there it goes walking again. So eventually it gets to where it's like breaking limbs. And it was starting to, startle us. It was starting to, we were scared. Like, it is what it is. We were scared. And it got to the point where I was like, leave us alone, because I could tell it was bipedal. An armadillo will sound like that, but I would have seen an armadillo, right? Like, it would have still been there. It wouldn't have stopped. And this thing, I finally got fed up, and I shined the light on the tree where I heard the noise. And I was like, I'm just going to wait you out. You're going to have to come around that tree. And I promise you, if you told me it was 12 minutes, I wouldn't doubt it, right? I sat there and held that light. And then I turn it off because I don't hear it no more. And I'm like, dude, you get your stuff together, man. What are you doing right now? And I get back up there to the fire, and it starts again. And I'm like, the damn thing is waiting me out, So we're sitting there, and I don't know what happens. A lot of people, I didn't look at these instances that happened in our encounter, till about 2 years ago. And this really didn't start to click with me. But we didn't hear anything. Like we were in a conversation, and I doubt we were in that much of a conversation. But all of a sudden we hear like a breathing, and it's right there at the wood line. Okay. And it's just looking at us. That only probably lasts for about 4 or 5 seconds. It's breathing a few times, but the breathing's heavy. It's like, you know, and it just turns around and walks off. The thing that gets me, that kind of clicked with me 2 years ago, is that it was absolutely silent except for us talking. There was nothing going on. We didn't hear no more now to think about it. And the other thing is, how did it get up the hill without us hearing it? You couldn't do it. Like I had just walked up and down that hill trying to find where these footsteps were coming from. And you can hear me, but we didn't hear this thing. And then when it turned around and walked off, you heard that. Did not hear it come up. It was just there. Like I said, maybe we were in conversation. I just find that hard to believe. And then so we got scared, even worse, you know, and Matt went to sleep. I was trying to not go to sleep. I was trying to stay awake. And then I fell asleep sitting up on the cooler. Like I like fell off almost. I like caught myself, and that woke me up. And then so I went and got in the tent, and I don't know what time it was in the morning. Now granted, we were sleeping in the same tent. Okay. We did have 2 tents, and that was what was originally planned, but due to the circumstances, we were bunking together. So we're in a tent sometime before morning, and Matt wakes up screaming. I wake up, and the tent is like right above my face, and it just kind of pops up, and you hear this thing run off, and it sounds almost like somebody drove a S10 or like a Ford Ranger, just drives it off through the woods. No road or nothing. They just take off through the woods in the damn S10. And then we just kind of sat up in the tent. And now this whole time I've had a Ruger Red Hawk, which is a 44 Magnum. It's a chrome. And it's on my hip, you know, like it's obvious I'm carrying this gun around. Right. So you have to account for that too. But Matt, daylight breaks, and Matt's like, yo, I'm going to get in the truck. Because we didn't want to open the door to the tent. We heard it run off. We didn't know if it was going to run right back up the hill, you know. And Matt's like, I'm going to go sleep in the truck. And I'm like, no, I'm staying here, because I don't want to wake up and that be in my mind. Like it's looking in the window at me. Like you lock eyes with it there. I don't want to do that at this point. And that was it for the first night. We rode to Hardee's, and I called my dad. And my dad said, you mean you've been looking for Bigfoot since you was 6 years old, and now you found him and you're going to come home? And so we stayed another night. The main reason was that was because it didn't hurt us. It could have, you know, because that was the main feeling upon seeing the thing. It's just like you're helpless. Like whatever that thing wants to do is what's going to happen. There's no Ruger Red Hawk or anything else that we had on us that would have changed the outcome of whatever it wanted to, you know, do. So, stayed another night, walked around, found a bunch of really cool stuff, some really cool breaks, and stuff that was away from where we thought the owners could get to. They were in their 60s, and the health wasn't too good, for them to be up there walking around in them hills. Yeah, I think if you asked anybody that's met these people, they'd be like, yeah, that's definitely not happening. And so we didn't hear nothing though. All throughout the day, didn't hear anything. We're back at camp, we're cooking, and as soon as it gets dark, the walking starts up again. It's grunting, it's walking, shaking trees, it's slapping trees. I think it was slapping trees. That's what I took that sound as. And then about 11 o'clock, I believe the worst part of the whole deal happened. It screamed. And now, mind you, it probably wasn't downhill, maybe 50 yards. Of course, it was dark, but maybe 50 yards. And that was bad, right? Like when it screamed, that was bad. The worst part was moments later, another one answered it from further off, like probably a mile, 2 miles, maybe. I don't know how far the sound was carrying, but you get what I'm saying. It was a ways off, and it answered. And so I looked at him. I'm like, bub, we're in the enclosure. Like we've went to the zoo and crawled in with the damn animals, bro. We need to get out of here. But nothing happened after that. Once all I was thinking, he was calling in the homies, but I guess maybe it left and went to whatever answered it, because it went absolutely dead after that. And I, became like obsessed with the topic and really started pushing to get proof of the creature's existence.
So did you start researching then even further after that time then?
Yeah. We spent, I probably spent 8-9 years on that property after that. We were able to get some good audio off of there. We got some tracks off of there. Some people had some really cool encounters, and, me included. And, it was an active spot, and it wasn't like they were there all the time. They passed through for about a week to 2, but it got there at the end to where they almost expected you to come out. That's what I was, because we would stay in the cabin and it would get slapped. And there was one night where I was there by myself. And so you got to figure, I won this Spike TV show. So I had $100,000 research grant. So I had my part of that. And so I was just researching Bigfoot. So that was my job. I just paid myself. I Bigfooted till the money ran out. And so I, going all the time, you go a lot by yourself. And I was there one night by myself. I was walking the trail and I heard something moaning, almost like it was hurt or something. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know if it was a cow, because there had been a couple cows that have walked through the property a few times. And I just got a terrible feeling, and so I went back to the cabin there. This little, it's like a shed that had been turned into a cabin, like a little 1-room deal. And nothing happened. About 3 a.m. or so, I start hearing what I took at the time was rain, right? It sounded like rain was hitting the roof. So I sat up in bed and I realized, okay, it's not that much rain, right? And then it dawned on me, that's rocks, dude. That's like small rocks. And then that stopped. and I heard something walk up on the porch. It took like 2 steps and was in front of the door. And I'm looking at the door, right? This is the only way in or out of this thing. My gun is in my car, which is on the other side of what's on the other side of the door, right? So I got this little dive knife, and this thing starts. I don't know if it was just like shaking the latch on the door, but it was actually moving the door back and forth very rapidly, and like the chain was getting pulled tight because there was a chain for the door, chain lock, and that was getting pulled tight, and it was oh, and then stops. I am standing there about to die, dude. I'm so frightened at this point. I'm sitting there holding that knife, and I eventually end up going outside to get my gun, right? But I didn't know if it was trying to get into me in there to me. And the next day, it didn't make sense that the thing couldn't have pulled the door off. That chain wasn't stopping whatever was snatching on it. So I kind of took that as they kind of started to expect us to run around in the woods after them.
Let me ask a question about that. About how long did they rattle that door?
Probably 5 seconds.
And then it just stopped and didn't come back?
It just stopped. I assume it sat out there and waited for me to walk outside.
How long did it take you to go get your gun? How long did you wait?
Oh, it was a minute. It was a minute. It was probably 20, 30 minutes. I was terrified.
So you waited long enough and then there just wasn't any evidence out there at all that anything had been there?
Nothing. Like the substrate it was just like leaves. So you wasn't getting anything like that, and the porch, it's just a wooden porch. It didn't leave a track or nothing on that. But that was the third time that had happened. That was just the first time or the only time that had happened to me. That had happened to other people that had stayed in the cabin as well.
The same circumstance, something rattling that door for a little while and
sounding, or just slapping the side of it, like just one time. Like there was a couple in there one time and slapped the side of it, but the things would normally just slap the house, but they would rattle that door on the cabin.
Do you think they were just intimidating you or trying to intimidate you or something? Or why do you think they were there?
I think they were there, and we're just entertainment. That's honestly what I took from that. Like, because there was no food on the property, right? Like me and the owner went back and forth about it all the time because she thought they lived there, and there just wasn't food to support it there. Like unless he was catching deer all the time, and this is not a possibility. Right, you're one sprained ankle from not being able to eat for 6 weeks, because you can't run a deer down anymore. And they wouldn't take the cat food. They would not dig in the garbage. So I took it as it was the entertainment. They would come up and slap the house to see if we'd turn the lights on and come outside. And then they'd sit there and watch.
So if there wasn't enough food source in the area, what do you think they lived on?
Well, not on her 30 acres, right? She thought they lived on the property somewhere. Now, when you're running, if you look at it from where my dad got his footage and where they are, it's along the same creek system at like 12 miles different. Now, if you run up and down the creek, you definitely have enough food there to support you, but you can't stay in one spot. You know what I mean? You come in, you eat all what's available, and then you got to move to the next spot and eat all what's available.
So they were more mobile than what she was thinking.
Yeah. They were not at any point living on the property. They stayed the night, and that was the same with everything. Like usually because after I got into it, I kind of got thrust into, you know, like getting my research out to people. Kind of got boosted right there at the beginning. And so we would start getting calls all over the state. And when people had activity or if they reported a sighting, you know, it would last about 2 weeks. If this stuff had already been going on for a week and they had seen it at, you know, like the midpoint, and then we get out there with 3 days left, you know, starts winding down. They're moving out. So we had a fund set up like in our bank, to where we had money when the next, like, with next hot lead we got, we would go to immediately, you know, be on the ground within 24 hours, because these things don't stay in one spot.
So you researched that property, that 30 acres, for, you said, around 9 years?
Yeah. And that property, they had 30 acres, but they were one of few homes that was in, like, I think 15,000 acre like hunting lease. You know, so it was pretty much untouched.
So why did you stop researching there?
Hurricane Michael. It destroyed everything in that area. That was a Category 5, and it sat over the top of the spot and churned for like 8 hours. And so you had every tree that was taller than 8 feet was broke at that mark. It looked like a bomb went off.
So is there a place now that you are researching?
What's that?
Is there an area now that you're researching?
Yeah. Right now we have a spot over in the Osceola Wildlife Management area that we do a lot of research, and we're starting to get back into Torreya State Park. You know, it's not like it once was, but the stuff's coming back.
Where do you think Bigfoot took off to from that area? If they were using that area that the hurricane came through, destroyed, where do you think they went?
Probably north. You know, there was a lot of sightings there after Hurricane Michael, up the Chattahoochee River north of there. So I was assuming, you know, because people didn't find a whole lot of dead anything, you know, during the storm, or after the storm, I should say. So I'm assuming they, you know, may have known it was coming, or maybe could sense the weather or whatever, and just, you know, hightailed it out of there.
So have you had any other experiences since in these other areas?
In the other areas, so we're in more of a swampy location now. We've recorded some really cool audio. We've recorded some really cool audio. But it's so thick, like thermals don't tend to help us out much anymore in the spot we're in. There's a spot in Alabama we've been to. We did recover a handprint that was left on the railing of the porch. It was a greasy handprint. There was about 3 of them, and we collected those samples up, and we're trying to find somebody that can test them. So we called the guy at NC State who was doing the thing there, and he straight up told me he didn't know how to test it. So, all right, I'll just keep it in my fridge.
Well, hopefully you can get that tested. See if you're trying to get DNA off of it, right?
Yeah. Just trying to, you know, see if they can give us any reason to research this place further, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
We were doing a lot of research in Mayaca State Park, Mayaca City. That's down Central Florida. You know, had a few encounters there as well. All kinds of encounters, though, to be honest with you. Like, Florida, the thing about Florida is when you leave your truck and enter the woods, you have no idea what you're going to see. It's not unheard of for people to let their exotic pets go or things like that. So we were in a bay head right there in Mayaca City off Jewel Gill Road, and the Ringling place was right down that same road, and they had three tigers get out. And I remember getting the phone call when we were in the woods, like maybe a mile away from that place. Like, yo, boy, y'all get to the truck. And it was Florida's one of those things, so you never know what you're actually going to encounter.
Might be more dangerous than Bigfoot for sure.
Yeah, I'm starting to think so, as long as I don't encounter people, though, I'm good.
So what do you think? What do you think Bigfoot is? What do you think they are?
I don't know. I'll be honest with you. I have no idea. I've seen the lights. We've seen the lights and had Bigfoot activity at the same time. Small town monsters came down, and they wanted to try and see the lights because I told them, I was like, "Hey, there's just lights all out here, dude." And we pulled up to a spot and got out the car. And I told them, I said, "Hey, if they're here, as soon as we get out the car, they're going to knock." What, in 5 minutes, we got our first knock. And I was trying to tell them, "Hey, don't knock back," because usually what I've found is that the second they know that they are there, like if you knock back to them, then they stop. But if you just listen, they'll continue to do it. So we heard about, I'd say, 8 or 9 knocks before one of them was so impatient he had to knock back, and then all the knocks stopped. But when we got back up to the truck, a blue basketball-sized light flew through the top of the pine trees. Like not over them, like in them. Like it was flying around, zipping through them, and they seen that. And then I told him, I was like, and that right there is why I don't know what Bigfoot is. Because, I mean, maybe it's not connected at all, but more times than not, there's weird stuff going on when we're having the Bigfoot encounters.
So do you think it's more often that you see the lights when you're having the encounters than during the dry spells when you're not seeing anything or having any kind of vocal or sounds from Bigfoot?
Yeah, now we'll see the lights sometimes when we don't have a Bigfoot encounter.
Okay.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, I have to add it in there because it's happening. But at the same time, I can't say it's from the Bigfoot. It may be something completely different, like maybe spirits or whatever. But it just because one's there doesn't mean the other, because there's deer out there. You know what I'm saying? So I can say, oh, the lights are from the deer, just exactly the same as I can say the Bigfoot's related to the lights.
For sure. You'd have to have something more to correlate those together to really be connected. I understand. Yeah. Have you seen any craft out there, or just those lights?
Not there, but when we were on the set of Bigfoot Bounty, I want to say about 19 of us watched a UFO in front of Mount Adams. And then immediately after that, 20 minutes, we started hearing knocks around our camp because we were staying in like this lodge, kind of smaller lodge, but it was nice setup for a reality TV show. And we started hearing knocks around our camp, and we went out and found a series of tracks that went all the way into this field. And there was this creek. It's like a pebble creek, it was some sort of drainage or something, because it was only about 8 to 10 inches wide. And it went all the way down through the center of this field. And we followed the tracks all the way to that creek or that little, stream, and they stopped. They didn't go anywhere. We were able to collect a hair sample at the fence line. We were for sure it was Bigfoot. But there was also a dog running down next to the tracks. Okay. Now, Spike TV let us submit that hair sample, for DNA testing, and that came back as dog, and they let us tell the story, or it came back as coyote, but they let us tell the story of finding the tracks. They showed us pointing them out, telling about the knocks, but Spike TV would not let us talk about the UFO. And back when I said, everything just got quiet, we didn't hear the thing, it was just there. How many people do you hear when they talk about UFOs and Bigfoot? It's just everything goes quiet. They don't hear anything. There's a lot of correlation between all three facets of the paranormal, with the UFOs, the Bigfoot, and the ghosts, because like, how are we communicating with Bigfoot in the woods? We're knocking on trees and they're knocking back. How are we communicating with ghosts? We're knocking on the table and they're knocking back, so.
So is that the only UFO experience that you've had out there?
Yeah. That was the only one. But I want to have another one, I think. I don't want to get abducted. I'm afraid I'll end up like in a zoo.
Well, anything else you can tell us about Bigfoot or your research?
The one thing that I've got that it's been on all the television shows, and science always says they need some numbers, they need some math, Our footage out of Torreya State Park. The footage itself, and you can find the thermal clip of Bobo in the same spot. He's like 6'4", I believe. And you can see how much bigger this thing was. But if you forget the footage and you look at Cliff Barackman's report on it, because the investigation of the footage we outsourced because we didn't want it to look like, we had skin in the game. We didn't, want to look like it was a biased report. So we sent it off to Cliff. Cliff does this report. He gets the size and does all the math and all the science to it and determines this thing was 8'3". Yeah, with a width on the shoulder. He had everything broken down. That's science. Our footage premiered at the FLIR International Festival in Orlando, or International Conference in Orlando. And there were dozens of thermographers look at it, examine it, and they're like, this is a real animal. Cliff had CGI people look at it, and they're like, yeah, that's not CGI. It's a real thing right there. And you should look at it. You should read it because it's really compelling. And it's one of the stronger pieces of evidence. I don't see why a scientist wouldn't take that and look at it and be like, oh, hey, listen, there is something to this, because it's all there. You can replicate every single part of it, except, you just have to have something that big, and that's really, at the end of the day, it looks like the science doesn't want to look into it because they always say, hey, we need something we can, do this math and all this stuff with, and then you hand it to them and it's like, they don't even care.
Exactly. I think that's why we need to have more interviews and more people talking about what their experiences are. So at least that word of mouth can get out there and people can know that validates it to some degree anyway.
Right.
So I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story with me tonight. And you have an absolute wealth of experience there. So
yeah, probably been doing it too much. you know. Probably should have like tried to solve world hunger or something, but oh well. Maybe somebody else will.
Well, I appreciate it. It sounds like you have fun out there.
Oh yeah, always got to have a blast, you know. Because as soon as you get bored with it, that's when you do something else, right?
That's right. The mystery keeps us going, but hopefully you'll be able to get that DNA. And when you do, I'd love to have you back on.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and it's been a pleasure.